Well, Discovery Health is rejecting allegations that it racially profiled doctors, saying there is no evidence to back up the accusations. The medical aid administrator for the scheme made its submissions to the Council for Medical Schemes. It's looking into accusations that only black doctors were probed for fraudulent claims. Barry Bateman is following the story for us. He joins us now live from Pretoria. So what has Discovery said to counter allegations of racial profiling, Barry?
Well, Discovery Health Chief Executive Dr. Jonathan Broomberg presenting quite a thorough investigation report to the panel led by Advocate Tembeka Ngukaitobi to show that there is no racial bias when it comes to their investigations of what is called FWA cases. That's fraud, wastage and abuse cases related to claims against the medical aid. And what they're showing is that the process from when a case is identified for investigation, they say firstly half of the cases that are identified or flagged for investigation come by way of tip-offs, either from their members or any other party, sometimes in the medical fraternity, who would tip off the medical aid scheme as to alleged of these practices taking place. The remainder of that is the result of algorithms, basically a computer analyzing certain conduct of the doctors or medical practitioners rather, where claims are made. There's certain things that would be flagged. But even in that particular instance, Broomberg submitting that this is a race-blind process. It happens before, it doesn't deal with the doctors' names. Only once the individuals or these cases have been flagged and the investigations have been registered, only then do they then know who the doctors are and are then able to determine the race of the individual. So what he's submitting to Ngukaitobi and the panel is that the entire process up until that point is race blind, but they do acknowledge, and this is perhaps the important concession, that a disproportionate number of black medical practitioners are flagged for investigation. But he says when it comes down to the findings or the outcomes of the investigations, the outcomes, whether positive or negative for this particular conduct, is equal among black and non-black medical practitioners. So what he's submitting is that this entire process is not racially biased. There's no evidence to suggest this, and this is in fact supported by the independent expert report which was commissioned by the panel, that there is no evidence of explicit racial bias in identifying which cases to be identified for this fraud, waste and abuse.
So what is actually suspected to cause this disproportionate number of black practitioners actually being investigated then?
Well, this is the problem, Shahan, and this is what has to be determined by the panel. What Discovery had come forward and with their investigation, what they're saying is that we're answering the question, is there racial bias? We're saying there is no racial bias, and here is the evidence to prove it. They're saying that the allegations of racial bias, it was speculation, and there's nothing to support that. But we do recognize that there is a disproportionate number of these black medical practitioners. So where do we come up and how do we identify this? They're saying that they haven't got a pinpoint on it, but it must be some other factor that requires further investigation that they would have to establish. Advocate Ngukaitobi saying, you know, this is certainly concerning for him. The degree of disproportionality for him is very concerning, and it does point towards racial bias. But in the absence of such a finding, they would certainly have to investigate further to try and establish what exactly is it that is resulting in, and you know, there's a lot of discontent among the black medical practitioners because they feel that they are being harassed. This was the evidence that was presented last year. So whether this aspect of it, this racial bias, can be excluded is perhaps one aspect, but there needs to be that next step, Shahan, to find out, well, why exactly is this the case?
All right, Barry Bateman is in Pretoria.